20. Surprising ways Americans had fun during the Great Depression. How did Americans find joy when jobs vanished, farms dried up, and hope seemed out of reach? You might be surprised. From dance marathons to homemade haunted houses, people got incredibly creative. In this video, we're diving into 20 unexpected, heartwarming, and downright bizarre ways folks entertained themselves during the darkest days of the Great Depression. Dance till you drop. How dance marathons gave Americans hope in hard times. Before reality TV ever hit our screens, Americans in the 1920s and 30s found drama, excitement, and even heartbreak in something just as intense: dance marathons. These weren't quick competitions or glamorous showcases. They were endurance trials where ordinary people danced for days, even weeks, hoping to win cash, food, and maybe just a little dignity. The trend started in the 1920s, part of the era's fascination with extreme endurance stunts. But when the Great Depression struck, these events took on a deeper meaning. For the people who joined, it wasn't just about winning, it was about surviving. With over 15 million Americans out of work, these contests offered something rare: regular meals, shelter, and a shot at prize money. Participants were given 12 meals a day, served at standing height tables right on the dance floor. They were allowed a 15-minute break every hour to rest, receive foot massages, or get checked by a nurse. But the remaining 45 minutes? They had to keep moving. Many contestants became so used to the rhythm that they figured out how to sleep while upright, with their partners supporting or dragging them. If a dancer's knee hit the floor, even for a second, they were disqualified. Some couples even tied a sleeping partner's arms around the other's neck to keep them from falling. It was exhausting and dangerous, and that's exactly why crowds paid to see it. Spectators came for the drama, the suspense, and the emotional breakdowns. The 1934 walkathon in Washington saw dancers collapsing into each other's arms, completely drained. That haunting image stuck with many, even as rumors swirled that promoters fixed outcomes. By the late 1930s, criticism grew, and many cities banned the contest. Still, for a brief time, dance marathons gave people a reason to hope, a reason to fight, and a reminder that even in the bleakest moments, the human spirit refuses to give up, lining up to see people sitting on poles. One of the strangest endurance stunts that kept its grip on the public from the 1920s into the Great Depression was flagpole sitting. And yes, it was exactly what it sounds like. People climbing up tall poles and staying there for days on end, just to see how long they could last. This offbeat trend was started by a Hollywood stuntman named Alvin "Shipwreck" Kelly. In the summer of 1930, he pulled off one of the wildest feats of the era, perching on top of a 225-foot flagpole in Atlantic City. For 49 days, Kelly stayed up there, eating, sleeping, even shaving, while thousands of spectators looked on. Reports say as many as 20,000 people gathered just to catch a glimpse of him swaying in the wind. Soon after, kids across the country jumped into their own version of the challenge: tree sitting. In backyards and neighborhoods, children climbed up trees and stayed put, determined to outlast their friends. One determined teen in Southern California reportedly lasted over 55 days, an incredible 1,320 hours. Just like Kelly, they used ropes and baskets to haul up supplies and food. These odd challenges became more than just a curiosity. They symbolized resilience. At a time when people needed hope and distraction, these strange stunts captured the imagination of the public. While the craze faded after that summer, it didn't vanish. In 1933, Richard "Dixie" Blandy broke the record with a 77-day sit at the Chicago World's Fair. For those who climbed up, it was a chance to stand out, maybe earn a few dollars and prove they could hold on, literally, when life got hard. And for everyone watching from below, it was entertainment they wouldn't soon forget. Venturing into haunted houses. A lot of the Halloween traditions we now take for granted, like trick-or-treating, dressing up in costumes, and walking through haunted houses, actually found their roots during the Great Depression. But back then, they weren't just for fun. They were part of a larger effort to keep kids from getting into serious trouble. Before these traditions took off, Halloween night was known more for pranks than candy, and in 1933, things went way too far. Across the country, groups of teens tipped over cars, chopped down telephone poles, and caused major property damage. That Halloween became infamous, and communities knew they had to step in. To prevent future chaos, neighborhoods began organizing safe, supervised Halloween events for kids and teens. Parents, despite tight budgets, got creative. They transformed basements and backyards into haunted houses using whatever odds and ends they had on hand. One 1937 party guide suggested creating a creepy path of horrors using old fur coats and strips of raw liver stuck to the walls. Guests would grope their way through in total darkness, while eerie moans and howls echoed in the background. Hairnets and wet sponges dangled from above, brushing against faces, and tunnels forced people to crawl on hands and knees. These homemade haunts weren't just fun, they brought people together. Families and neighbors worked side by side, turning scraps and leftovers into spooky decorations and clever frights. It was all about using what little you had and turning it into something magical. Swallowing goldfish for glory, the strangest craze of the Great Depression. Among all the strange fads born from the Great Depression, goldfish swallowing might just be the weirdest of them all. It didn't come from a circus or radio show. It all began with a group of students at Harvard in 1939 and a simple bet. A few classmates dared a freshman to swallow a live goldfish for $10. And on March 3rd, right there in the college dining hall and in front of a small crowd, including a newspaper reporter, the student went through with it. He chewed up the squirming fish, swallowed it down, and walked away with the money. And a strange kind of fame. Once Life magazine picked up the story, things took off. Across the country, college students scrambled to outdo one another. The number of fish swallowed kept climbing, first 42, then 101, all in just a matter of weeks. It wasn't about hunger, it was about bragging rights, laughter, and doing something totally unexpected. Soon, students began taking it even further. Some in Illinois swallowed 5 live white mice. In Oregon, a student gulped 139 earthworms. One in Pennsylvania even ate an entire issue of The New Yorker. At Harvard and the University of Chicago, students chewed up bits of old phonograph records. Still, goldfish remained the crowd favorite. The fad didn't last long, it fizzled out by the end of spring. But it perfectly captured something about that era. People craved escape, even if it came in bizarre forms, and young people especially wanted to feel bold, noticed, or just entertained during bleak times. With little money and few options, they made their own fun. It was silly, it was strange. But for a short while, swallowing goldfish became the talk of a nation trying to smile through the hard times. The Soapbox Derby. In the middle of the Great Depression, when money was tight and spirits were low, a simple race for kids sparked a movement, and it all started with some soapboxes on wheels. In 1933, a journalist named Myron Scott spotted a group of boys in Dayton, Ohio, racing their homemade cars down a hill. These weren't fancy machines, just scraps of wood and wheels, often made from leftover soap crates and baby buggy parts. But Scott saw something special. He snapped a few photos, then offered to help organize a bigger race. By the end of that summer, the event had drawn a crowd of up to 40,000 spectators, people eager for something fun, affordable, and uplifting. In 1934, Scott convinced Chevrolet to sponsor the first All-American Soapbox Derby, a national competition just for boys. Girls, unfortunately, weren't allowed until 1971. Local races were held throughout the Midwest, and 34 winners came together in Dayton for the championship. Just 1 year later, the finals were moved to Akron, Ohio, a city that still hosts the Derby to this day. By 1936, the race had become a national sensation. That year, hundreds of thousands tuned in by radio to hear the thrilling results of the third All-American Soapbox Derby. For the kids, building those cars taught more than speed. It encouraged creativity, problem-solving, and perseverance. For parents and communities, the event offered a moment of pride and joy. It was a chance to come together to celebrate youthful ingenuity and to forget their troubles, even if only for an afternoon. Did any of the creative Depression-era activities remind you of how your parents or grandparents had fun growing up, seeing high-tech Hollywood movies? Even as the Great Depression dragged on and everyday life grew tougher for millions of Americans, Hollywood was thriving. In fact, the 1930s became one of its most impactful decades, transforming the film industry and offering a much-needed escape for people desperate for a break from reality. Back then, a movie ticket cost just under 25 cents, cheaper than it had been in 1929. That meant even during hard times, a night at the movies was still within reach for most families. For the price of a sandwich, you could step into another world, filled with music, laughter, and Technicolor dreams. This was a turning point for cinema. Silent films were gone, and the talkies had officially taken over. Studios didn't hold back. They poured money into sound stages and new ideas that made the most of this exciting audio technology. That led to a golden age of musicals like 42nd Street, 1933, and The Wizard of Oz, 1939. Big songs, dazzling choreography, and stunning visuals, especially from directors like Busby Berkeley, gave audiences pure joy and emotional relief. It was also the decade that saw Walt Disney release Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937, the very first full-length animated film, a massive risk that paid off and became a timeless classic. Moviegoers also laughed through Marx Brothers comedies, swooned over fast-paced romantic comedies with stars like Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant, and cried through moving stories like A Star is Born, 1937. And before the Hays Code clamped down in 1934, films even pushed the envelope. You could see Marlene Dietrich share a kiss with a woman in Morocco, 1930, or watch Barbara Stanwyck play a bold, ambitious woman in Babyface, 1933. Even as jobs vanished and hope wore thin, people kept going to the movies. Attendance dropped slightly, but over 40% of Americans still went every single week. Because when real life felt too heavy, the silver screen gave them something else: laughter, beauty, and for just a little while, magic. Binging on the lifestyles of the rich and the famous. Even during the darkest days of the Great Depression, Americans never lost their appetite for drama, especially when it came to the rich and famous. One of the biggest obsessions of the time was the rise of café society, a glittering world of nightlife, gossip, and scandal that gave ordinary folks a peek into the lives of those who seemed untouched by hardship. After Prohibition ended in 1933, many old speakeasies were reborn as elegant nightclubs and fine restaurants, especially in New York City. These spots quickly filled up with movie stars, musicians, wealthy elites who had managed to hang on to their fortunes, and plenty of socialites desperate to stay relevant. Of course, gossip columnists were never far behind, eager to report every juicy detail. One of the most watched figures was Alfred Gwynne Vanderbilt, Jr. Paparazzi snapped shots of him making the rounds at New York clubs, often seen with a rotating cast of glamorous women. His half-sister, Gloria Mimi Baker, made headlines too. Though she was only 15, she was often spotted in nightclubs and casinos, sparking public concern. But it wasn't just nightlife antics that grabbed attention. In 1934, the custody battle over young Gloria Vanderbilt made front-page news. Readers couldn't look away from the fight between her mother and aunt, and Gloria was dubbed the Poor Little Rich Girl, a title that stuck not only with her, but with others like Brenda Frazier and Barbara Hutton. Frazier became a media darling at just 17, landing on the cover of Life magazine before her debutante ball. Meanwhile, Woolworth heiress Barbara Hutton became known for her rocky romances, marrying and divorcing 2 European royals by the time she was in her early 20s. In 1939, when Woolworth employees staged a protest, Hutton's tone-deaf response said it all. "Why do they hate me? There are girls richer than I am." For Depression-era readers, these stories were a strange comfort, a glimpse into luxury, chaos, and human drama, far removed from their own struggles. Reading the comics and complaining about how political they were, every Sunday during the Great Depression, kids all across America would rush to grab the Sunday paper, not for the headlines, but for the colorful, exciting world of the funny pages. That's where characters like Detective Dick Tracy, the daring Flash Gordon, and the ever-optimistic little orphan Annie came to life. For just a few minutes, families could escape into thrilling adventures that offered laughs, heroes, and sometimes a surprising dose of politics. Little Orphan Annie was one of the most popular characters of the time. She wasn't just known for her red curls and fearless attitude. She also had some surprisingly pro-business views. In a 1933 comic strip, Annie cheerfully asks, "Gee, who says business is bad?" And whenever she found herself in trouble, she could count on help from Daddy Warbucks, a kind-hearted millionaire whose name subtly suggested he'd made his fortune from war. Annie's worldview wasn't random. It reflected the personal politics of her creator, Harold Gray. He started the strip in 1924, and by 1934, he was raking in $100,000 a year, an enormous sum for the time. But when Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected in 1932, Gray wasn't happy. He used Annie's comic adventures to criticize FDR's New Deal and attack labor unions. That didn't sit well with everyone. In 1935, the New Republic went so far as to call Little Orphan Annie fascism in the funnies. Still, the comics weren't just about politics. They were entertainment, and more importantly, they were cheap. For the cost of a newspaper, readers got action, humor, and even a little social commentary. Kids enjoyed the wild plots, while adults often caught the deeper messages woven between the lines. Creating real estate empires in Monopoly. It's almost comical that a board game all about buying property, charging rent, and getting rich became a national obsession during the Great Depression. But that's exactly what happened with Monopoly. And the backstory is even more ironic than the game itself. Long before Monopoly became a household name, a woman named Elizabeth J. Magie created a game in 1904 called The Landlord's Game. Her goal wasn't to celebrate wealth, it was to teach players about the dangers of unchecked capitalism. For years, her version quietly spread among activists and educators who believed in its message. But in the 1930s, things took a sharp turn. A man named Charles Darrow began selling a version of the game that closely resembled Magie's design. In 1935, he sold it to Parker Brothers, a game company that was struggling to stay afloat during the Depression. They rebranded it as Monopoly, and it quickly became a sensation. For families facing economic hardship, Monopoly was a low-cost form of entertainment that could be played again and again. It also gave players a chance to pretend, to live out a fantasy where they could own hotels, collect rent, and build an empire, even if just for a few hours. But while the game saved Parker Brothers from bankruptcy, the woman who started it all wasn't so lucky. Elizabeth Magie received just $500 and no credit for her invention. In the end, Monopoly became a cultural icon, not just for its gameplay, but for what it represented. Escapism, imagination, and a strange twist of fate where a warning about greed became one of America's most beloved games. Swing music, the sound that lifted spirits in the Great Depression. In the midst of the Great Depression, a bold new sound swept across America and gave people something to dance about, literally. It was called swing, and it quickly became the heartbeat of the 1930s. At the center of it all was clarinetist Benny Goodman, known far and wide as the King of Swing. Swing was a lively offshoot of jazz, filled with energy, rhythm, and improvisation. It had actually been pioneered by many talented black musicians in smaller, lesser-known bands. But it wasn't until white bandleaders like Goodman began performing it in the mid-1930s that the genre really caught fire nationwide. And one major reason for its explosion? Radio. With more homes owning radios than ever before, swing music was suddenly everywhere, from dance halls to living rooms. Its upbeat tempo and playful spirit became a kind of medicine for the soul, especially during such hard times. Big bands brought swing to life. Their high-energy shows offered something magical, an escape from the daily grind. People gathered, danced, and for a few precious hours forgot about job losses or empty pockets. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment 1 to let us know you're still following. Tuning in to hit radio shows about masked Avengers. During the Great Depression, when money was tight and hope was hard to come by, radio became a powerful source of comfort, connection, and escape for American families. At the start of the 1930s, only about 40% of households had a radio. By the end of the decade, that number had more than doubled, reaching 83%. Radios weren't just gadgets, they were lifelines. Families would gather around the set every week to follow thrilling adventures like the Lone Ranger and the Green Hornet, both masked heroes who became legends in living rooms across the country. Comedic duos like George Burns and Gracie Allen kept audiences laughing, even when there wasn't much else to smile about. One of the most listened to programs of the time was Amos and Andy, a show based on racist stereotypes that unfortunately brought minstrel-style entertainment into millions of homes. Despite the controversy, it became a ratings giant. Children had their own favorites too. Radio versions of Dick Tracy and Little Orphan Annie, based on popular comic strips, captured kids' imaginations. Young listeners even mailed in Ovaltine seals or Quaker Oats box tops to join secret clubs tied to their favorite shows. Radio wasn't just about fun, though. It was also a source of real-time information. Americans tuned in for baseball scores, movie gossip, and breaking news. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt changed presidential communication forever by delivering fireside chats directly to the public. From the banking crisis to the New Deal, he made complex issues feel personal and reassuring. This decade became known as radio's golden age. Thanks to creative producers, talented voice actors, and the intimacy of the medium, radio helped millions find moments of joy, calm, and community in one of the toughest periods in American history. Listening to classical music on the radio. While swing music dominated dance halls during the 1930s, classical music also found a powerful new audience, right in people's living rooms. Thanks to the rise of radio, the works of Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, and other legendary composers reached more Americans than ever before. In 1930, CBS began broadcasting Sunday afternoon concerts from the New York Philharmonic. Just a year later, NBC made its own mark by launching weekly live opera broadcasts from the Metropolitan Opera House in New York, starting on Christmas Day no less. But the biggest moment came in 1937, when NBC invited famed Italian conductor Arturo Toscanini to lead a specially formed orchestra on American radio. Toscanini was already a giant in the classical world, and his presence brought prestige and millions of listeners. On Christmas Eve, Americans from all walks of life gathered around their radios to hear the first of 10 unforgettable concerts. For many, it was their first time hearing classical music performed live. Suddenly, the elegance of the concert hall wasn't just for the elite, it was for everyone. These broadcasts proved that even in hard times, music could still unite, inspire, and elevate the spirit. Reading books and literature. In the 1930s, when everyday life was filled with hardship and uncertainty, books became a quiet refuge for millions of Americans. Much like the movies of that era, most best-selling novels were written with one goal in mind: to help readers escape their daily worries. These stories, filled with romance, adventure, or mystery, gave people a break from reality, and they sold well because of it. But not all writers chose the easy path. A few brave voices used fiction to shine a light on the harsh truths of the time. Sinclair Lewis, for example, sounded the alarm about rising fascism in his novel, It Can't Happen Here. John Steinbeck's powerful classic, The Grapes of Wrath, brought the Dust Bowl struggles of poor farmers into vivid focus. Other writers like Erskine Caldwell revealed the brutal poverty of the rural South, while James T. Farrell and Studs Terkel captured the gritty realities of life in Chicago's working-class neighborhoods. How sports lifted American spirits during the Great Depression. During the Great Depression, when times were tough and money was scarce, sports became more than just games. They were a lifeline. They gave Americans something to cheer for, something to believe in, and a reason to smile again. And leading the charge was baseball, the undisputed king of sports in the 1930s. For just a few cents, fans could head to the ballpark and watch legends like Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and a rising star named Joe DiMaggio take the field for the New York Yankees. These weren't just athletes. They were heroes. They gave people pride, hope, and a reminder that greatness was still possible, even in hard times. And for kids playing baseball in the park, that kind of fun was totally free. But it wasn't just baseball. Miniature golf became a nationwide craze in the early 30s. It was cheap, fun, and perfect for families looking for a lighthearted way to spend time together without spending much. A few clubs, a ball, and some quirky obstacles were all it took to enjoy an afternoon escape. College football also took off during this decade. New bowl games like the Orange Bowl, Cotton Bowl, Sun Bowl, and Sugar Bowl made their debut. And in 1935, the very first Heisman Trophy was awarded, solidifying college football as a major force in American sports, enjoying government-funded art and theater. During the Great Depression, it wasn't just factory workers or farmers who lost their jobs. Artists, performers, and writers also found themselves out of work, struggling to get by. But thanks to President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, a new idea took shape. If teachers and construction workers could be employed through public programs, why not artists? After all, as Roosevelt himself said, artists have to eat too. Through the Works Progress Administration, WPA, the federal government hired painters, playwrights, musicians, photographers, and actors to keep American culture alive. Murals popped up in post offices, libraries, airports, and schools, bringing color and creativity into everyday spaces. Art was no longer just for galleries, it was for the people. Famous artists like Thomas Hart Benton painted strong, muscular workers, celebrating everyday American grit. Edward Hopper captured quiet, lonely city streets with haunting beauty. Reginald Marsh turned his eye to the slums of New York, painting scenes of hardship and humanity. The WPA didn't stop at painting. Writers and photographers were hired to document life across the country, capturing stories and images that still serve as valuable records for historians today. Which of these 1930s pastimes would you have enjoyed the most, and why? Accessing photography. As technology improved in the 1930s, cameras became smaller, sharper, and easier to carry. With that shift, photography took on a more powerful role, not just as documentation, but as a moving art form that captured the raw emotion of the times. And no moment needed honest storytelling more than the Great Depression. Photographers like Margaret Bourke White and Walker Evans used their lenses to show what words often couldn't. Their images revealed the grit, struggle, and quiet strength of everyday Americans. These weren't just snapshots. They were visual testaments to survival and dignity in the face of hardship. Alfred Eisenstadt, a German-born photographer, became a household name through his work for Life magazine, where his portraits of current events and celebrities graced countless covers. Meanwhile, Alfred Stieglitz, a champion of photography as fine art, helped introduce European modernist artists to American audiences through his gallery work. The 1930s also marked a creative high point for Ansel Adams. Though best known for his majestic landscapes, he also began turning his camera toward industrial scenes, proving that even factories and machines had beauty worth preserving. Together, these artists helped America see itself more clearly, one frame at a time. Social dancing. Even during the darkest years of the Great Depression, Americans found ways to move, connect, and celebrate life. And one of the most joyful outlets was social dancing. While dance marathons pushed physical limits, another style soared in popularity for all the right reasons: the jitterbug. With its fast-paced, bouncy rhythm and spontaneous moves, the jitterbug wasn't just a dance, it was an escape. People of all ages embraced it as a way to shake off the stress of the times, let loose, and feel alive again. The dance floor became a place of energy, laughter, and human connection, something deeply needed in an era marked by loss and struggle. Literary historian Morris Dickstein observed that in the 1930s, movement was what art was most concerned with. He spoke specifically about dance and film, but his insight applied to real life too. Dance became more than entertainment. It was a metaphor for resilience, for reaching out, and for finding grace in difficult times. At-home games and DIY activities. When money was scarce and nights out were no longer an option, American families turned inward, finding joy through simple creative entertainment right at home. The old saying, "Desperate times call for creative measures," couldn't have been more true during the Great Depression. Without much to spend, families made the most of what they had. Parents got inventive, transforming ordinary items into fun and games. As mentioned earlier, some even turned their basements into haunted houses using furs, sponges, and liver. Pure creativity on a shoestring budget. But it wasn't just for Halloween. Families played classic board games, worked on jigsaw puzzles, or made up stories to pass the time. Many crafted their own games from cardboard and scraps. It wasn't fancy, but it brought people together. These moments gathered around the kitchen table, laughing over a game or solving a puzzle, became memories that lasted a lifetime. Attending fairs and expositions, though not part of everyday life, large public events like World's Fairs held deep importance during the Great Depression. One standout example was the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, nicknamed A Century of Progress. Among its many spectacles was Richard Dixie Blandy's daring flagpole sit, 77 straight days perched high above the fairgrounds. It was a stunt, yes, but it captured the imagination of thousands and added a sense of wonder to an already uplifting event. These fairs weren't just about fun. They highlighted new scientific discoveries, technological advancements, and artistic creations. Visitors could play games, sample food, explore futuristic exhibits, and momentarily forget their daily hardships. In a time of struggle, fairs like these offered more than entertainment. They offered a hopeful glimpse into a brighter future. Together, through tough times. While families found joy in board games and backyard fun, something even more powerful was happening on a larger scale. Community gatherings. In the face of hardship, people leaned on one another. And when money was tight, shared experiences meant everything. One shining example came after the chaotic Halloween of 1933, when vandalism ran wild across the country. In response, neighborhoods began organizing safe, festive Halloween events for local children. These weren't just about candy, they were about connection. Families worked together to decorate, host games, and create memories that brought laughter and unity. Events like the Soapbox Derby also became more than just races for kids. When thousands gathered to watch children speed down homemade tracks, it wasn't just about the thrill, it was about cheering as a community, taking pride in the younger generation and feeling like part of something bigger. In a time when individual luxuries were rare, these shared moments gave people something priceless: the joy of belonging. And that sense of unity carried many Americans through even the hardest days. How people lived before air conditioning. Remember those scorching summer days before air conditioning? Back then, summer felt endless, and the heat unrelenting. Staying cool wasn't easy, but our parents and grandparents found all kinds of clever ways to make it through the hottest days. Curious about their secrets? Let's explore the smart architecture, creative inventions, and daily habits that helped generations not just survive, but truly enjoy those sweltering summer months. Ancient methods. Perhaps you'd be surprised to learn that the battle against heat has been ongoing for thousands of years, and ancient people had incredibly clever, even sophisticated solutions to cool their living spaces. Their ingenuity laid the foundation for many cooling principles that are still applied in some places today. Imagine a scorching afternoon in ancient Egypt. Houses built of mud bricks absorbed immense heat from the desert sun. To find comfort, the Egyptians had a simple but surprisingly effective method. They hung mats made of reeds or linen, thoroughly soaked in water, over their windows. As the dry, hot desert winds blew through these wet fabrics, the water on the surface evaporated. This evaporation process not only made the air entering the room more humid, but more importantly, it absorbed heat from the air, making the room feel significantly cooler. This is the basic principle of evaporative cooling, a technique that you might still see used in some dry climates today, albeit in more refined forms. It didn't produce the biting cold air of air conditioning, but it truly made a big difference in the scorching desert heat. Moving west to the great ancient Roman Empire. The Romans were famous for their massive architectural structures and their incredibly complex and impressive aqueduct systems. Some of these aqueduct systems were even designed to channel cool water through the inner walls of homes. Just imagine, the cold water from underground would absorb heat from the hot walls, making the interior of the house much more comfortable. This can be considered an ancient form of radiant cooling, using the stable temperature of underground water to combat the harsh heat outside. It was an ingenious combination of advanced construction techniques and maximizing the use of available natural resources. And in medieval Persia, people developed one of the most unique architectural structures to cope with the heat: wind towers or wind catchers. These towering structures were specifically designed to capture high-altitude winds and channel them down into cool underground water reservoirs beneath the house. As the air passed over the cool water, it was cooled and absorbed additional moisture, then drawn back up and circulated into the living spaces. This was a natural ventilation system combined with evaporative cooling, perfectly utilizing the stable temperature of the earth. It created a cool, fresh airflow circulating throughout the house, effective even on days without strong winds. This demonstrates that from very early on, people understood the importance of air movement and using water for cooling. Even in Asia, especially ancient China, fans had been a familiar cooling tool for a very long time. Beyond delicate paper and silk handheld fans, they also developed large fan systems operated by human or water power, often used in palaces or large spaces. Even if it was just moving air, a gentle breeze on a sweltering summer day was enough to bring immediate relief. Even up to the 17th century, Dutch inventor Cornelis Drebbel experimented with a method of cooling air by adding salt to water to increase the evaporation effect. He demonstrated this to King James I of England and was recorded as having reduced the room temperature by several degrees. Although this method did not become widely popular due to its complexity and cost, it shows that humans had continuously sought and experimented with new ways to beat the heat from very early on. These stories from ancient civilizations are clear evidence of human wisdom and resilience in adapting to harsh environments. They didn't have modern technology, but they had keen observation of nature and the ability to turn available materials into effective tools for survival and development. These are lessons in ingenuity that we can still learn from today. Lifestyle adjustments and daily habits. Before the cool breezes of air conditioning became a given, American life was a symphony rewritten with each heat wave. People learned to live with the heat, adapting every small habit to find comfort and keep their daily rhythm intact. Starting early, resting during peak heat. Have you ever wondered how a summer day in old America began? As the first rays of sun were still shy, not yet scorching, people would rush to wake up. Early morning was the golden hour to complete heavy tasks. Farmers headed to the fields at dawn, factory workers started early shifts, and homemakers also tried to finish major housework during that precious cool period. Do you remember how cool and pleasant early mornings felt? People of the past cherished every moment to get as much done as possible. As the sun climbed higher and temperatures peaked, life in some places seemed to slow down or even halt entirely. In southern states, small towns might fall silent, shops closing for a few hours and residents returning home to rest, avoiding going out during the harshest sun. This was America's version of the siesta, a simple but very practical acknowledgement. Working hard under scorching sun was both inefficient and dangerous for health. Midday break. Did you know that when the heat reached its peak in the afternoon, many places chose a very interesting solution? A midday break? Similar to other tropical regions around the world, small towns and shops would temporarily close for a few hours during the hottest part of the day, allowing everyone to go home to rest and avoid the harsh sun. This was a very simple but extremely effective habit, as everyone understood that trying to work in excessively hot weather was both unproductive and could be dangerous to health. Seeking cool sanctuaries. When the heat became unbearable indoors, people sought relief elsewhere. Porches, as we've mentioned, were a top choice where the whole family gathered to chat, eat, or simply sit and enjoy the breeze. Do you remember summer evenings sitting on the porch, sipping iced tea or lemonade, listening to the buzzing cicadas and chirping crickets. Parks with dense tree cover became oases in the heart of the city. Rivers, lakes, or beaches always attracted crowds for swimming, bathing, or simply sitting and enjoying the cool breezes rising from the water. For some, movie theaters were a great option, as they were among the first public places to be air-conditioned. Large department stores or air-conditioned restaurants also became ideal destinations for escaping the heat. And if going out wasn't an option, basements were excellent shelters where temperatures were always stable and much cooler than upstairs. Sleeping under the stars or on fire escapes. When night fell but the heat lingered indoors, many chose to sleep outdoors. The sleeping porch mentioned earlier was an ideal spot with open space and screens. But in crowded cities where spacious porches were a luxury, people found every way possible to escape the stuffiness. Have you ever seen fire escapes crowded with people sleeping on mats, or even rooftops turned into beds? Though sometimes dangerous, as in the tragic case during the 1896 heat wave when many rolled off roofs and died, the desperation from the heat drove people to such decisions. Dragging beds into the yard, or simply bringing blankets and mats to parks or riverbanks to enjoy the cool night air were also common sights. Unusual eating habits. Eating also had to adjust to the weather. The top priority was cold dishes that required little cooking to avoid standing long over a hot stove. Salads, sandwiches, or light, refreshing meals became popular. If cooking was necessary, it was often done early in the morning or late in the evening, after the sun had set, to minimize heat radiating indoors. And of course, cold drinks were indispensable. Iced tea, lemonade, or fresh fruit juices were excellent choices for quenching thirst. Ice cream, with its sweet taste and quick cooling ability, was a favorite of all ages, associated with countless summer memories. Do you have any memories of enjoying a cool ice cream cone on sweltering summer days? The power of water. In hot weather, drinking water became the #1 priority. Did you know that without air conditioning, the only way for the body to cool down is by constantly sweating? Just a slight oversight and dehydration can occur quickly, leading to the risk of heat exhaustion and dangerous heat stroke. Therefore, everyone learned to always carry water with them, or actively seek out water sources to protect their health. Water was always a trusted companion in the battle against heat. A cool bath at the end of the day was a magical remedy for a hot body. For children, splashing under a sprinkler in the yard was endless summer fun. Swimming in rivers, lakes, or the sea was the most effective and enjoyable way to cool down. Even simple acts like soaking feet in a basin of cold water or sucking on an ice cube could provide instant relief. Life before air conditioning forces people to adapt and creativity. They built breathing houses, wore heat-reducing clothes, adjusted daily schedules, and utilized every element of nature, water, wind, shade, and ice, to keep themselves cool. It was a world that knew how to slow down and sweat through sweltering summer days, enjoying life to the fullest before the magic of air conditioning changed everything. Do you remember any other habits or ways of living from the past to cope with the heat? Please share your memories in the comments. Smart architecture, the house is a cooling machine. Let's turn back the pages of memory to a bygone era, when houses were not just shelters from rain and sun, but rather ingenious cooling machines, crafted with wisdom and a deep understanding of nature. You can recall a hot summer afternoon in the late 19th century, finding peace on a wide, spacious porch, slowly swinging in the shade, listening to the buzzing cicadas. These porches were places for gathering and chatting, and they were an indispensable part of 19th century home design, serving as an outdoor shaded living room where families could catch the breeze and even dine outdoors in the fresh air. Some houses even had sleeping porches, screened areas where children could bring their pillows to sleep, catching the night breeze, and drifting off to sleep with the sounds of crickets and distant traffic. If you mention this to younger folks today, they might give you a puzzled look. But ask anyone who grew up in the South, or even the North on occasion, and they'll nod knowingly. A sleeping porch was often a screened-in area, sometimes on the second floor, sometimes just a simple covered space, where the whole family could catch a breeze on stifling nights. Why brave the bugs and the darkness outside? Because in the days before AC, the air outside after sundown was usually much cooler than inside the house, where heat lingered in the walls and floors. Sleeping out there, you'd fall asleep under the stars, listening to the nighttime sounds, and yes, sometimes fighting off the occasional mosquito or two. Some families would even set their bed legs in coffee cans filled with kerosene to keep ants from crawling up during the night. That's how determined folks were to chase a good night's sleep on a hot summer night. Stepping inside the house, you would immediately feel the difference. Ceilings were built exceptionally high. These high ceilings created a sense of spaciousness, comfort, and had a special cooling effect. Hot air always rises, so high ceilings helped trap the hot air at the very top, far from where people lived. As a result, the living space below became much cooler and more comfortable. Sometimes the most intelligent solutions come from traditional architecture itself. Now let's talk about windows. Back then, a window meant much more than a pretty view. As glass became more affordable, homes sprouted more and bigger windows, all strategically placed for maximum airflow. The real game changer was the double-hung sash window. This design let you open both the top and bottom sashes at the same time. Why? Hot air naturally rises, so by opening the top, you let the warmest air escape. At the same time, opening the bottom allowed cooler air from outside to flow in and fill the room. It was a simple, effective way to keep air moving and create a comfortable breeze indoors. Some homes featured extra tall windows to catch even more airflow, while others were carefully oriented so that doors and windows lined up to take full advantage of prevailing winds. Ever open up windows on opposite sides of the house and feel that sudden, magical rush of cool air? Like the whole place was taking a deep, refreshing breath? That's the power of cross-ventilation, and older homes were designed to harness it. It was both art and science, passed down through generations of builders and homemakers. Ventilation got a further boost from clever features like wide central hallways, where doors and transom windows lined up to create a breeze highway through the house. And if you look up, you might spot small structures poking from the rooftop, belvederes or cupolas. While they might look decorative, these little towers acted like a house-sized chimney. As hot air accumulated in the halls and upper rooms, it would rise up and out through the vents at the top, pulling fresh, cooler air up from below in a constant cycle. Even the smallest details were about airflow and comfort. Transom windows, those small windows above doors, let breezes move between rooms, even when the doors were closed for privacy. In crowded city apartment buildings, air shafts and shared ventilation spaces helped increase the circulation in tightly packed quarters, a necessary measure before the days of modern building codes. And then there was the summer kitchen. Cooking on a wood or coal stove could turn an ordinary kitchen into an oven. To keep all that heat out of the main house, many families built a separate building, or at least an outdoor kitchen, for cooking during the hottest months. That way, the main house stayed cooler and even the aroma of home cooking drifted outside for all the neighbors to enjoy. Material mattered too. Thick brick, stone, or adobe walls helped insulate homes in dry climates, keeping things cool inside on the hottest days and holding warmth on chilly nights. Wide eaves and steep roofs shielded the house from the punishing sun, while helping rainwater drain quickly away. Finally, look outside. Shade trees were planted for a reason. Large, leafy trees are beautiful. They cast welcome shadows on homes, porches, and sidewalks, lowering the temperature by several degrees. Exterior shutters, awnings, and louvered blinds were used to keep sunlight out, but still let breezes in. When you put it all together, you realize something. Our ancestors were incredibly thoughtful about how they lived with the land. Instead of fighting nature with machines and power, they worked with it, embracing shade, wind, and time-tested materials to make homes that stayed comfortable, season after season. So, before air conditioning rewrote the rules, home really was a kind of cooling machine, a place where architecture, tradition, and a little bit of ingenuity came together to turn back the heat of summer. And for many, those memories of slow, breezy evenings on the porch or drifting off to sleep with a gentle night wind are some of the sweetest of all. What features of an old house impress you most? Wide porches, tall windows, outdoor sleeping, or something else? Using water, ice, and fans, active methods. In addition to adjusting home architecture and changing daily habits, people of the past were also very skillful at actively using available resources and tools to create coolness. Three main elements were effectively utilized: water, ice, and fans. The cooling power of water. Evaporative cooling is an ancient but highly effective technique, especially in dry climates. One of the most common ways was to hang damp curtains or cloths in front of open windows. When wind blew through this damp fabric, water would evaporate, absorbing heat from the air and making the air entering the room cooler, while also increasing humidity. This method was particularly effective in dry climates, where the air could absorb a lot of moisture. However, in humid places it was less effective and could even make the air more uncomfortable. A mechanical version of this principle is the evaporative cooler, also known as swamp coolers. These devices work by blowing hot, dry air through a continuously wet material, often wood fiber pads or other porous material. As the air passes through, water evaporates, cooling the air before it's blown into the room. Like hanging damp curtains, swamp coolers are very effective in dry climates, but almost useless in high humidity areas. Additionally, using water directly on the body was an instant cooling method. A cool bath at the end of the day was wonderful therapy for a hot body. For children, playing under a sprinkler in the yard was endless summer fun. Swimming in rivers, lakes, or the sea was the most effective and enjoyable way to cool down. Even simple actions like soaking feet in a basin of cold water or sucking on an ice cube could provide immediate relief. The great value of ice. In the 19th century, the industry of harvesting and transporting ice developed strongly. People cut ice from frozen lakes in winter and stored it in insulated ice houses for use in summer. Ice was used in ice boxes, the predecessor of modern refrigerators. An ice box was a simple insulated cabinet where a large block of ice was placed inside. The ice melted slowly, keeping the interior cool, helping to preserve food and drinks. Buying ice daily or weekly from the ice delivery man was a familiar part of life. Thanks to ice, desserts like chilled watermelon or ice cream were no longer just for the super rich. Ice cream parlors sprang up across America, serving scoops of ice cream that helped people forget the heat for a few sweet minutes. A simple but effective application of ice for air cooling was to place a fan blowing over a large block of ice. The airflow from the fan passing over the cold ice surface would be cooled before spreading into the space. This method was even used to cool President James Garfield's room during his illness. Although it couldn't cool an entire large room, it created a cool airflow directly in front of the fan, providing comfort to those sitting nearby. Having cold drinks like iced tea or lemonade were also excellent refreshing choices. Various types of fans. Fans are tools that create airflow and have existed for thousands of years. Besides elegant handheld fans, initially status symbols and then mass-produced promotional items, many other types of fans were developed. Mechanical or human-powered fans. Before electricity, the first fans relied entirely on human power. There were fans attached directly to rocking chairs. Every time someone rocked, the fan blades moved, sending a cool breeze to their back. There were even fans operated by foot pedals, quite similar to pedaling a stationary bike. Famous figures like George Washington and Ben Franklin also experimented with these mechanical fans. As long as someone operated them, the fans would keep spinning, soothing the air throughout hot summer days. Non-electric motorized fans. As society developed, people sought to reduce manual labor with non-electric motors, such as spring wound fans, or those using kerosene, alcohol, or gas to turn the blades. These fans were more convenient than mechanical ones, but still relied on fuel and were often quite noisy. Nevertheless, they provided a valuable cool breeze for those living in an era without grid electricity. First electric fans. A major breakthrough occurred in the late 19th century when Schuyler Wheeler and Philip Deal created the first electric fans. Initially, electric fans only appeared in luxurious places like factories, large stores, hotels, or restaurants. places that first had electricity. It wasn't until the mid-20th century, when grid electricity gradually became widespread, that electric fans truly became indispensable in every home. Ceiling fans. Even before portable electric fans existed, ceiling fans were present with extremely unique designs. At first, ceiling fans operated by water flow through a system of ropes and pulleys, creating a cool breeze for the entire room. Later, thanks to Philip Deal's improvements, electric motor-powered ceiling fans appeared, efficiently circulating air and making the heat much more bearable. Whole house fans or attic fans. To cool an entire house, many families installed attic fans or whole house fans at the very top of the house. When outdoor temperatures cooled down in the evening, simply opening windows on the lower floors and turning on the fan would pull hot air up into the attic and push it out, while cool air from outside flowed in to replace it. The cooling effect was very noticeable, though these fans were often quite noisy. Window fans. Another popular option was window fans. These fans were designed to fit snugly into window frames and could be adjusted to blow air into the room or pull hot air out. Combining multiple fans in different locations would create cross-ventilation, making the house much cooler. Some families even placed bowls of ice water in front of window fans, creating homemade cold wind. A simple but surprisingly effective trick. Have you ever seen or heard about these strange types of fans? Or do you have any traditional cooling tips passed down in your family? Share your story. Clothing and accessories. Can you believe that simply choosing the right clothes made a huge difference in the battle against heat? In the pre-air conditioning era, this was an extremely important factor, demonstrating human ingenuity and deep understanding of nature. The power of natural fabrics and light colors. Choosing fabric material was the top priority. People especially preferred natural fabrics that were absorbent and breathable. Remember the feel of a breezy linen shirt, pulling sweat away and letting you breathe easy? Linen was the #1 choice for summer wear, due to its coolness, lightness, and excellent moisture-wicking ability. Cotton fabric was also very popular for its softness, breathability, and good absorbency. Even thin wool could be used on not too hot summer days or in the evening. Conversely, synthetic fabrics, which retain heat and don't allow sweat to escape, were completely avoided in summer. Color also played an equally important role. You'll see many people wearing light colors, especially white, in old summer photos. The reason is simple. Light colors reflect sunlight better than dark colors, thereby helping the body absorb less heat. The classic image of a southern planter in a pristine white linen suit is a clear example of this. Style and layers, clever adaptation. Although Victorian fashion demanded formality regardless of the weather, men still wore long-sleeved shirts, long trousers, sometimes adding vests and coats. Women wore floor-length dresses with petticoats and corsets. Americans of that era still found ways to adapt. Clothes were often designed to be loose-fitting, not tight against the body. This allowed air to circulate better between the skin and the fabric, helping sweat evaporate more easily and cooling the body. Furthermore, people also reduced unnecessary layers of clothing during the hottest months. At home, men might go shirtless or wear thin cotton undershirts. Women often wore loose cotton dresses, and children often ran barefoot, wearing only shorts or underwear on particularly hot days. And a simple but effective body cooling technique was to use damp clothing. As sweat evaporates, it draws heat away from the body. By dampening clothing, whether from sweat or intentionally dampening a part, the evaporative cooling effect would significantly increase, especially with a breeze. Do you remember the feeling of a slightly damp shirt in the shade, bringing unexpected comfort? Accessories, convenient heat fighting, weapons. Accessories also played an equally important role. Wide-brimmed straw hats were indispensable when going out in the scorching sun, helping to shield the face and neck from direct sunlight. Umbrellas or parasols were also more commonly used than today. And of course, we cannot forget handheld fans. From delicate imported silk and paper fans that were status symbols in the early 19th century, handheld fans gradually became common items, even mass-produced promotional giveaways by the late 1800s. At a hot church service in 1895, you might see a sea of fluttering fans, with each parishioner diligently fanning themselves in the oven-like pews. Handheld fans were such an essential item that they transcended all social boundaries, from ladies with luxurious silk fans to factory workers with simple paper fans. However, there were also special cases when work regulations or occupational safety required wearing clothing completely unsuitable for the weather. For example, women working in kitchens, near fire and high temperatures, sometimes still had to wear fire-resistant wool clothing no matter how hot it was. That was a sacrifice for work, a difficult aspect of pre-air conditioning life. Looking back, coping with the heat felt less like a struggle and more like a finely tuned art form. Every detail, from the cut of a shirt to the choice of accessories, was thoughtfully chosen to bring the greatest possible comfort on even the hottest days. Impact of AC in the transition, and then, almost overnight, everything changed. The arrival and spread of modern air conditioning didn't just offer relief from scorching summer days, it completely reshaped how Americans lived, worked, and even where they settled. At first, air conditioning was rare, bulky, costly, and mostly found in factories or hospitals, where keeping temperature steady was a matter of safety and health. For ordinary folks, the only place to truly experience that cool, refreshing air was at the local movie theater. On a sweltering afternoon, stepping into that chilled darkness was almost magical. For many, it was the only escape from the heat, and theaters quickly became summer sanctuaries. The appeal was so great that Hollywood started timing their biggest releases for the hottest months, giving birth to the summer blockbuster, entertainment, and a break from the sun all in one ticket. Everything shifted in 1947 when affordable window air conditioners first hit the market. Suddenly, average families could dream of bringing that cool comfort home. The trend caught on quickly. Only about 12% of U.S. households had air conditioning in 1960, but by 1980 that number soared to over half, and today nearly 9 out of 10 homes are air-conditioned. It's one of the fastest and most profound shifts in modern American living. This new era transformed both the way we lived and the places we called home. Architects no longer had to design for maximum airflow. Porches shrank, windows got smaller, and homes were built tighter to keep the cold in. Features like sleeping porches, wide central halls, and tall ceilings faded away, replaced by compact rooms and tightly sealed spaces. Air conditioning also sparked a population boom in places that were once simply too hot for most people. Cities like Phoenix, Houston, and Las Vegas saw explosive growth as AC made southern and western climates comfortable year-round, drawing millions of newcomers to the Sun Belt. But something subtle shifted too. The comfort zone for most Americans narrowed. Where previous generations were toughened by the heat, today many can hardly imagine life without cool air on demand. Porch gatherings faded, people spent less time adjusting to the day's temperature, and the natural rhythm of outdoor summer life slowly moved indoors. Yes, AC brought comfort, productivity, and new possibilities. But it also made us forget some of the resourcefulness and togetherness that helped earlier generations weather the summer heat. Maybe that's worth remembering and cherishing on those days when you step out of the cool and into the sun. Even in the toughest times, Americans proved that joy, creativity, and community could still thrive. Which moment stood out to you most? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip back in time, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Past Not Past with someone who'd love a bit of history too. Thanks for watching.